It is the best time in college baseball. It's time for the greatest show on dirt, and we're heading out to everybody's favorite word, really just Peyton Manning, Omaha. Can't wait. It is time for the Elite Eight, the best in college baseball. I'm Greg Larnerd alongside my sidekick, Mr. Johnny VTV. As you can see, he was all geeked up about his Wake Forest Demon Deacons. He went out there to the Winston-Salem Super Regional last weekend. Johnny, good to be back with you. You've never looked better. I mean, obviously, I would like that to be a Tennessee bucket hat, but we can wake and bake.
It's always wake and bake, and it's always great to be back with you, Mr. Greg Larnerd. We were texting a little bit over the weekend, and, dude, I got to say, man, that Super Regional was just electric. It's indescribable, just how involved it was. And obviously the results are great. You always want to see a win when you make a long trip, and it was a long road trip to Winston-Salem, but it's all worth it in the end when they come home with the W and they're moving on to Omaha.
And a lot of money in your pocket as well, which is always a good thing for you and for me as well, because I can't wait to get my Wake Forest shirt. I almost said Vandy because they have similar colors, and I was thinking about the last time I went to a college baseball playoff game. I did see Vanderbilt get a walk-off win in their first game against, I don't even remember who it was against, but it was in the 2021 men's college World Series. Then obviously I saw Tennessee put up 0 against Virginia. That was tough, but glad that it worked out well for you. And we've got a bunch of teams to talk about here. Let's get right into it, and let's go to one side of the bracket. Let's start with bracket 2, Johnny, and we'll start with the darlings of this dance, a team that's the underdog through and through. They've upset in the supers, they upset in the regionals. That's Oral Roberts. They'll be taking on TCU, the baseball powerhouse. They're favorite in this one. Tell me a little bit about how Oral Roberts got there. I know you were on them after the in the regionals, but tell me a little bit about this matchup and your thoughts.
Oral Roberts, man, 4 seed that is still dancing. The first time in almost 11 years that we've seen it. Well, it is 11 years. 2012 Stony Brook was the last 4 seed that made it to Omaha. And the crazy thing about Oral Roberts, so I was giving him out at 500 to 1 before the regionals. This team had the makings of a unit that could go far. And the fact is, they're still being disrespected and undervalued in the market. I think a lot of it has to do with bookmakers. One, don't really understand college baseball to the level that somebody like me understands it. And number 2, they still see Oral Roberts as a 4 seed. They're like, you know what, man, they're just lucky to be here. They're not really a threat. It's not the case. This is a capable team. They're gritty, they're resilient. They lost an 8-0 lead to Oregon in game 1 of the Supers. I thought they were done. They come back and they win a walk-off fashion in game 2 to stay alive, and then they win game 3 in a very tough Eugene environment. Can't say anything about this team except just the composure and the grit that they showed. And I think the fact is they're playing a TCU team that is something of a carbon copy to this Oregon roster. Good offense with a lot of power, can hurt you, put up some runs, but the pitching isn't the greatest. And I think for a team like Oral Roberts, who's probably going to be throwing their ace, Jacob Hall, in this game, there's a lot of room for the Golden Eagles to pull off this upset. I mean, you're seeing them plus 140, plus 150 right now, and I think that price is probably just going to continue to get bigger as people bet TCU, and I really don't understand why. The Horned Frogs got a good Friday guy right now who settled into that role in Cole Klecker. Solid, not somebody that I think is shut down like a Paul Skeens or Hurston Waldrop or somebody like that. But, if you're Oral Roberts, there's a lot of different ways they can beat you. They have really deep pitching. They have an All-American closer in Cade Denton. But their offense, man, it is legit. They're led by center fielder Jonah Cox, a guy who has a 47-game hitting streak. That's unheard of at any level. And obviously it wasn't a line for Quinn Mathews' 56-game hit streak 70 years ago. But, that's kind of what we're seeing right now. And, this team also fields really well as well. And I think Oral Roberts, for the price, they're definitely in play to win this game. But I do think they can go even farther. I think they have what it takes to make it to the finals on this side of the bracket. And the fact is, TCU's offense is really built on the long ball and power. And in Omaha, it's hard to put that ball out there consistently. So you got to be a team that's going to be getting a lot of base hits, a lot of extra base hits, can do a lot of the small things. And Oral Roberts is a great fielding unit. So I think this game is definitely in favor of Oral. I don't understand why they're so big on this price.
Wow. Okay. We're going to go and take the 150 there with Oral Roberts. Let's go to the other matchup on that side of the bracket. This one's a little bit more even, and it's harder to sort of determine. Florida, obviously a big time baseball powerhouse. They're the favorites in this matchup, but don't sleep on the Virginia Cavaliers. They're a group that's generally pretty good when it comes to baseball. I know they've been there the last couple of years in the Men's College World Series. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
Wasn't a big Virginia guy all year. I kind of believe that they were frauds. They lost a lot of series they shouldn't have lost, and I kind of feel that way still. They survived against ECU, who had them on the ropes, just couldn't finish. And Duke, like we all know, Duke didn't deserve to be
It's a
there.
basketball school.
Coastal Carolina broke my heart when they couldn't finish out that regional in Conway, and I think Coastal would have really given them a run for their money. But nevertheless, Virginia's here. Things they do well, they hit. They have a lot of production from numerous sources in their lineup. They led the country in batting average over 330 on the year. They have a guy in Jake Geloff who has 44 home runs in the last 2 years. A guy like Kyle Teal, their catcher, who is relentless, great two-strike approach. A guy who's probably going to be a top 10 pick this year in July. The thing, though, with Florida, I just think they're too much more talented than Virginia. Now, the thing with the Gators are they're not as deep as Virginia in the lineup, but their stars are better. Wyatt Langford, the guy I've been talking about all year on this program even, this generation's Mike Trout. Jack Caglione, who's just a force to be reckoned with, a guy who I think probably should win the Golden Spikes. Josh Rivera, who's just blossomed into a superstar shortstop this year. Cade Kurland, who's an outstanding freshman. BT Riopelle, a seasoned vet who will not pursue baseball after this postseason has concluded. So the fact is, I think Florida has the slight edge here, and they're going to come away with this one because ultimately, Greg, what I said in the Super Regionals before that happened against South Carolina was the winner of that series would come out and be the representative from that side of the bracket in the finals. And Florida's going to be throwing Brandon Sproat, a guy who has high-profile stuff with an elite fastball and a really good changeup. And the fact is, Florida's bullpen was my only concern all year, and it still is. But because the Gators have been getting such length from their starters, the bullpen has not really been in play. With the starters going 6, 7, 8 innings, it's taken that kind of liability out of the equation a little bit. And I think if Brandon Sproat can go out there, give his team 6 innings, 3 runs, something along those lines, it's going to put the Gators in a really good position to take game one. It's a short favorite at minus 135, and I do think Florida is the correct side here. I think we're going to see something special happen from Florida.
So we're going to go with an upset, an underdog, and the favorite in bracket number 2. Let's go to bracket number 1 now, and we'll start with your Stanford Cardinal, who are big-time underdogs against Wake Forest. I don't know if I really have to ask you to get into this matchup too much, but we'll see if Quinn Mathews goes against Wake Forest. Rhett Lauder, I know you've talked a lot about him. Give me the lowdown on this matchup.
So I haven't confirmed the pitching matchup on the Stanford side. I would guess David Esker is going to throw Quinn Mathews game 1. He's their guy. He's somebody that's thrown like over 350 pitches in the last 12 days. Something insane. He's coming off 156 complete games, 16 strikeouts against Texas. Just an out-of-body performance from the best lefty in the country, a guy who I quite frankly think should be a first-round pick, but probably won't be. The thing with Quinn Mathews, assuming he throws, the guy's got to be fatigued at some point. I mean, he's going to be coming on short rest. And, as dominant as a lefty as he is, he's actually struggled against teams that constantly get base hits off of you. Case in point is Arizona. Arizona roughed them up twice towards the end of the year. And Wake Forest is a team that obviously has a lot of power. They can hit home runs. They hit 9 home runs against Alabama in game 2 of the Supers. But they can pester you for 10, 12 hits. They are very versatile in this lineup. And ultimately here, what's got to happen is Wake Forest has to get Quinn Mathews out of the game early. Don't let him go past 6 innings, even though we know the pitch count isn't really a factor. But at the end of the day, the Stanford bullpen is very suspect. They have some good arms, but, they're very Jekyll and Hyde. And the fact is, I expect Wake Forest to throw Rhett Lauder and Rhett Lauder to give out another out-of-world performance, something that he's been doing constantly every start this year. The big thing here for me, Stanford does have an SEC caliber lineup. First rounder Tommy Troy, guy who's played almost every position at Stanford, minus catcher, pitcher, and first base. He's the real deal, dude. He's batted 400 for a lot of part of this season. They have a guy like Alberto Rios. They have Drew Bowser, who's finally suddenly finding his power stroke. Carter Grant, Eddie Park at the top of the lineup. I'm missing somebody else because their lineup is so deep. Malcolm Moore, the freshman. But I think ultimately Rhett Lauder, his off-speed stuff, mainly his changeup, which is one of the best pitches in the country, will be able to keep this Cardinal offense off balance. And at the end of the day, I do think Wake Forest gets this done. They are the better team. And, I just don't know how much more Quinn Mathews has. This guy has logged so many pitches, and, he's been doing that all year. What people didn't understand after their freak out of his 156 pitch effort over the weekend, Quinn Mathews has 14 starts this year of 110 pitches or more. He's had 105, 106 pitches in a lot of games I've watched, and he went back out for the next inning. They have no pitch count for this kid. It's one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen, especially this day and age in baseball. But at the end of the day, Wake Forest does a lot of the little things right. And to tell you the truth, Stanford was lucky to get past Texas, if we're being honest. That misplayed fly ball that did it in the closer. I think Wake is the correct side, and they should beat them by a decent margin.
Yeah, I'm with you on Quinn Mathews in terms of, some of these guys. And in this day and age in baseball, there's not a lot of guys with a rubber arm and can go out there and just throw all the time, especially with restrictions and Tommy John being so big and so massive. But Quinn Mathews seems to be that guy who's just got that rubber arm. And you told me a story earlier on my show in the week about how he pitched a bleep ton one weekend, and they asked his parents if he could come back and pitch a little bit more later in the series because they didn't want to, risk him too much, or they wanted to make sure everybody was sort of on the same page and everybody was cool doing what they wanted to do in terms of letting him throw a little bit more pitches. So I'm okay with David Esker doing it. He's, as you alluded to, he's been doing it all season long. And when you get to the postseason, you stretch it out a little bit more. And that's exactly what Quinn Mathews did. Now, who will Wake be facing? That is going to be the question. Let's move to the final game of the weekend. It's the big matchup on Saturday. Our Tennessee Volunteers, big underdogs against Paul Skeens and LSU. They battled Paul Skeens tooth and nail at Alex Box Stadium. The Vols had some late errors in that game that allowed LSU to win and give them the 5-2 victory. But talk to me a little bit about this matchup. Do our Vols have any chance? Are we going to get Dolly versus Skeens part 2, or is it going to be Andrew Lindsay, do you think?
That's the big question. And I can't get to this game in terms of a betting standpoint 100% until I know who's pitching. I got to be honest, despite the fact that Andrew Lindsay's been throwing every Friday night game one since that Vanderbilt series, I do think Tony V is going to go Dolly here. I just do. Dolly's their best pitcher. Dolly's a guy who's going to be a top 10 pick. Dolly's a guy who, I've dubbed all season as a generational pitching prospect. All the hype Paul Skeens has been getting this year, that's what Dollander was getting before the year started. So because he's had a roller coaster year and some struggles, people have kind of forgotten about that. But what people don't understand is Chase Dolly, this kid, despite an up and down year, he comes in the biggest moments and he delivers because he's a winner. He's an ace. This guy got roughed up by Southern Miss in one inning of a couple infield singles and one blast. Looked like he had the makings of a short outing. 3 innings, 4 runs. Tony V has faith in his guy, keeps him out there. He goes 8 innings, shuts down Southern Miss the rest of the way. That's a pesky lineup too. That being said, in this game here, I didn't take a position for the purpose that I knew LSU was going to garner a lot of money with Skeens going, and that's exactly what happened. And I don't think it's found its peak yet. I think LSU is going to keep getting more money as Saturday night approaches. So the fact here is, either way, whoever's throwing Lindsay or Dollander, I think the Vols have a really good shot at pulling off the upset, and I'll tell you why. As you alluded to, the Vols really battled against Skeens back in April. They weren't even close to playing their best baseball. They were playing horrible. They still were gritty, and they were gutting it out against a team that was playing much better than they were. At the end of the day, they only lost 5-2, and that game was like 2-2 or 3-2 going into
It was 2-2
in the 8th inning.
Yeah.
It was 2-2 going into the 8th inning. And the only reason that LSU started scoring a few runs to put that game away was because Blake Burke dropped a routine ground ball from second base to get out of the inning, like an inexplicable, egregious drop. And that was really the nail in their coffin. Had Blake Burke caught that ball and we're going later into this game tied, the advantage is heavily in favor of Tennessee. They have much deeper pitching. If you take away Skeens, I mean, it's not even close. And at the end of the day here, I think Tennessee is going to pull this one out. They lost that series. That's fresh in their mind. And I bet if you ask Tony Vitello, he wouldn't want to face any other team than LSU in this situation because he's a competitor. He wants to beat the best. That's just who he is. That's his personality. That's the way he coaches, and that's the way his players are. And I think the fact is Tennessee, if their offense, which is actually the only concern I have about them, plays the way they did against Southern Miss in the final two games, I do think Tennessee will come away victorious on this one. And LSU will be in a real heap of trouble because they lost the opening game with Skeens burned for the rest of the weekend. So with that being said, I would probably still wait on Tennessee because you're going to be able to get an even better number. I think this could get up to like plus 180 maybe by the end of the week. By the end of the weekend before Saturday comes around. Tennessee's dangerous, dude. They are right there with Wake Forest, neck and neck with front to back best pitching in the country. Don't sleep on the Volunteers because they have a tough matchup and they're going against Paul Skeens. They did just fine against him in the first matchup, and I think they picked up a few tricks, and they're playing much better baseball, their brand. This is a team that is battle-tested and resilient, something LSU is not. They haven't had to go through the struggles Tennessee has, and they're still standing. And I think they have a very good chance to win.
It's going to be fun to watch, man. I'm excited for that matchup, and you're right. I think having faced Skeens already once this year might be helpful to them. Although Kentucky really didn't, couldn't get to him at all in that first game he pitched. But you're right. If LSU loses that first game with Skeens, they are burnt for their College World Series lives. And Tennessee, you're right. They've got to take care. They got to pitch it well because that lineup on the other side for LSU is dangerous. So they've got to be careful. I hope they go with Dolly. I hope we get a chance to see round number 2 as we move forward here. But before we get to the futures and things like that, Jared and I both know that, fantasy football, it's never a bad time for it. Never too early for fantasy football. Fantasy Alarm Fantasy Football Draft Guide as well. That drops today. It can be purchased for $26.99. It comes with free. Comes free with a monthly or annual All Pro subscription. All Pro subscribers get access to the draft guide as part of their premium subscription. Start your 7-day free trial of Fantasy Alarm All Pro and get immediate free access to the draft guide when it drops today. Go to fantasyalarm.com for that. All right, Johnny, let's get to the futures here and going into the College World Series. Here are your numbers in terms of the teams with their chance to win a College World Series. Wake has got the best odds at plus 235, LSU at plus 340, Florida at plus 400, Virginia at plus 600, Tennessee plus 800, TCU with the Horned Frogs plus 900, Stanford and the Cardinal plus 1,500, and Oral Roberts plus 2,500. So talk to me about these futures, these odds. Is there anything that you'd like to play right now going into the College World Series?
If you haven't gotten a piece of it, I think Oral Roberts is pretty good because if you map out their path to victory, they have to beat TCU game 1 because it's really hard to fall behind game 1 in this format. It's not a weekend series like it was last weekend. So I think if Oral Roberts beats TCU, they're more than capable of beating either Florida or Virginia. Now, obviously, it's an uphill battle, but at the end of the day, like I just mentioned it, they have a lot of pitching, and they have a great closer. They have guys in the bullpen that they feel comfortable with and have been pretty reliable overall. But most of all, they have an offense that can just get you in so many different ways. Via the long ball, they can pester you for 3 straight hits, steal a couple bases. This is a team that has a lot of base stealers, Jonah Cox being one of them. They have a great group of fielders. I think they have the best fielding percentage in the remaining tournament. So I do think at 25-1, and you can find even better prices if you shop around. This Oral Roberts team is not one to be taken lightly. Very capable, and I truly believe that they have a shot to be representing that side of the bracket. And that's for the long shot, but I do have a couple more that are closer to shorter numbers.
So what else do you like?
I think Tennessee 8-1 is really interesting to me because the fact is The Volunteers are, like I said, neck and neck with Wake Forest in pitching, and it really comes down to their offense. Like, Drew Beam is their Sunday guy. Drew Beam is an ace of a staff on almost any team in the country. There's maybe only 3 or 4 teams where Drew Beam is not a Friday night guy, and he's going to be a first rounder next year. Chase Burns has become an absolute weapon. I love the way Tony V has deployed him as a utility guy that could close out a game for 1 inning or come in relief and throw 4. I mean, the fact that he was a starter and he's a born starter, he can give you that depth, and he's not going to be worn down because of the excess pitches that he would have to throw. So the fact is, it really comes down to Tennessee's offense. But at 8-1, to me, if they beat LSU, they probably have to face Wake most likely in the next game. I still think Wake Forest wins, but on that side of the bracket, the team I do believe is Tennessee, because like we're talking about, bro, pitching travels, pitching matters. And if their offense could just even give a little bit of run support, this is going to be a very tough team. And then last but not least, it's going to be Florida from the other side, because I do believe most likely Florida is the team that comes out of this. Because if they beat Virginia and they get the winner of Oral Roberts TCU, they're going to get Thurston Hurston Waldrop, a guy who is improving his draft stock this year above anybody else in the sport. It's not to the Cade Horton effect, because Waldrop's already a projected first rounder, but Waldrop for a lot of the season was like a guy that was in the mid to late 20s. With the recent success that he's had, Greg, 25 strikeouts to I think only like 3 earned runs in his last 15 innings across 2 starts in the playoffs. The guy I think is coming into the low to mid teens, possibly even the top 10 if he delivers. And if Waldrop keeps pitching the way he has, it's going to be really difficult for any of those teams to knock off Florida.
You know what also we have to talk about just quickly is the fact that all of these teams are going to be descending upon Omaha, where maybe the ball doesn't fly like it does down south, obviously at Charles Schwab Field. And the field's a little bit bigger than some of these other parks as well. So that's something to watch. Obviously, that sort of limits some of the power hitters that some of these teams have. And maybe you have to play a little bit more small ball. I had somebody who was a national champion with the LSU Tigers baseball team in the 90s and early 2000s come on with me. And, he thinks Tennessee's got to play a lot of small ball if they want to beat Paul Skeens and hit the gaps, hit the alleys, hit the ball down the line, just try to keep the ball in the ballpark, let LSU try to muscle up and try to get it out of that big ballpark. And hopefully Tennessee will be able to take care of LSU. We'll see what happens. And this game's on dirt too. A lot of these fields that these teams play on, they're all on turf.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be an interesting sort of transition for some of these teams, like most notably Wake Forest. I know for a fact, like their turf is it's crazy.
Gold.
They have gold turf.
Yeah.
So I expect a team like them to make the proper adjustments. I don't know if it's going to be that much of a factor. I would say like maybe for the outfielders covering that ground a little bit, the ball's a little bit slower, most likely on that. And maybe if you're like a third baseman and you think the ball's going to get to you quicker than it is because you're used to playing on turf. But these are adjustments that I don't really think are going to be too overbearing. I feel like, the coaches and, these teams have been working on that, and they're aware of what kind of bounces and what kind of speeds that the ball's coming off of on this grass as opposed to the turf that they've had. But, I mean, dude, we're in for a great weekend. I'm so excited, man. And, I need Wake, I need Oral to get 1-0, and then, a lot of good things can start to happen from there. But the first one I feel like is always the toughest.
Yeah, it definitely is. You got the nerves. Everybody wants to succeed and play well in Omaha. And obviously, this is on the biggest stage in college baseball. The schedule this weekend, we've got Oral Roberts against TCU at 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Friday. We've got Virginia against Florida at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Friday. And then on Saturday, your 2 games are going to be Stanford versus Wake at 2, and then Tennessee against LSU at 7 o'clock. That's another edition of College Baseball Done Bettor. Find us up on all social media at Bettor Network. I want to say thank you to Jared Moore, who always pushing the buttons and making us sound and look good from behind the scenes. For Johnny VTV, to my right, your left, whatever it may be. Find him on Twitter there at _Johnny VTV. Enjoy the games, man. It's going to be a fun weekend, and I can't wait to do this again with you next week, and we kind of see where the dust settles.
Yep, this is a big one, man. Enjoy it. Let's get some winners here. And I have one more note real quick about this Tennessee LSU thing. And we had a whole Thursday night special about it during the season. If it is indeed Chase Hollander going against Paul Skeens, tune into it. I don't care if you're at a frat party or you're at bottle service at Live. Make sure you tune into this, because what's going to happen is this. It will be the last time you ever see two of the great college pitchers, two generational prospects, duel at this level again. And the stakes are obviously the highest they've ever been in their lives. Make sure you tune into that, because the next time you see these two pitchers, they will be in the major leagues. They will be the guys you back on a lot of strikeout overs. You back for Cy Young tickets. It is truly special, and I didn't know if we were going to get this matchup again. To tell you the truth, I'm not 100% sure we are if Hollander doesn't go. But if he does, make sure you enjoy it. Take it all in, because what you're going to watch is special.
It's going to be special. Again, for Jared Moore, Johnny VTV, I'm Greg Larnerd. This has been another edition of College Baseball Done Better. Enjoy Omaha. We'll see you next week.